What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined by my other longtime TOJ podcast co-host, Dalbin. It's been far too long since we've done one, so we wanted to do a little bonus holiday weekend optimistic riff episode. Dalbin, how you doing, my friend? It's always great to talk.
Always great to talk to you. And as you were doing the intro, I said that I was thinking in my head, when you and I do these episodes together, it should really be called Dadlands.
That's it. There's a couple old heads talking kids, talking Jets, talking transactions. That's it.
Yep.
I mean, that's it. We've been doing this since long before we were dads.
Long before we were dads. Yes.
Of course. Look, it's been after a slow start. We got a lot of positive energy, positive vibes around a couple of major signings. A bit of a disappointing week, losing out on Jadeveon Clowney. However, it's early in the offseason. We got the draft upcoming. Plenty of time to make veteran acquisitions after the draft, as the Jets always seem to do. How are you feeling holistically overall about how the Jets have handled everything since the start of the league year?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And, it's interesting because while I did not share everybody's pessimism when we lost Bryce Huff, just because I think a guy that plays 40% of the snaps and at a position group that if you were to trust Rob Saleh for one position group, I think it would be the defensive line, right? Like that'd be the group that you're like, okay, if you were going to lose somebody, it'd be okay then. And to your point, there's still edge rushers available, Bud Dupree, Yannick Ngakoue, right? There's guys that could maybe replicate some of the production and that you hope for the Will McDonald second-year leap. But after losing Bryce Huff, man, and I know we drag Joe Douglas a lot, when we try to hold him accountable. But if I had told Jet fans in January that after losing Aaron Rodgers, we would have won 7 games, right? Beaten the Eagles, gone toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, beat the Bills opening week, all that jazz. And then we would bounce back from that by signing one of the better left tackles of our generation in Tyron Smith, right? And I get the injury concerns, but he's played more games than AVT over the last couple of years. So if you're going to have injury concerns about somebody, have them about AVT. But that you were going to get Tyron Smith, one of the better left tackles in football over the last few years. That you were going to add Mike Williams, a guy who we've been pounding. I feel like you and I have been pounding the table for the Jets to sign Mike Williams so much. And
we've been waiting for 9-round Mike.
9-round Mike, right?
He was always going to be a Jet at some point.
Always. Well, and you're talking about a guy who just a couple years ago had 49 catches for over 1,000 yards. Like, that's absurd. To average 20 yards a catch is nuts. So you sign him, so you get him. You sign, you've been calling him what's your nickname? John Simpson, Wario Lincoln. Yeah. So you sign him. You trade for Morgan Moses, who shouldn't have left in the beginning. And I had a running joke on Twitter that said it seemed like Joe Douglas was just collecting Ravens offensive linemen, this offseason. But the Jets have had a really good offseason, and if you are going all in, this is the kind of offseason you needed, right? Like, Simpson's younger than Moses and Tyron Smith, so he could be part of the long-term plans, but you bookend this team with 2 monsters at tackles, 2 big dudes. Like, you are now a team that folks are scared to come off the bus and play, right? Like, it's a team that just looks inherently much more dominant. So I think Joe Douglas has done a really, really good job. There's still more to do, but you can't feel anything but excited for the work that he's done. Now the pressure turns to Robert Saleh, right? And it's got, can he coach this team up to be a playoff team, which is what they should be next year, right? Like, all things considered, they should be a 10-win team, 10, 11 wins, competing for the division against a team in Buffalo that's taken a step back this offseason.
Yeah, this is the last dance Jets we were talking about last year. This actually really lines up to that. Getting Tyron Smith at this stage, getting Mike Williams at this stage, even getting Morgan Moses at this stage. Yeah. This is kind of what we were expecting, and it makes sense with Rodgers' window. I think after the injury, he could say whatever he wants. I think you get 2 years of him, and this should hopefully be his best year that you get for him. It's hard to get progressively better as you get into your 40s, and he'll turn 41 in December. I think he recovered in an expedited enough way where we can expect him to be himself when the season starts, which is exciting. And if he's, I don't know, the 9th or 10th best quarterback in the league, which, is a small step back, but not a big step back, with Breece Hall, with Garrett Wilson, with Mike Williams, if he's ready to roll and is Mike Williams, and Tyron Smith out there for even 14 games.
Right.
That's enough where that offense should be comfortably in the top half of the league. with the defense that they'll be in the top half of the league. And that in this current division should be enough to really compete to win the title and the division title. And I don't feel like that's an unrealistic goal for the Jets with what we've seen from Buffalo and Miami, with where New England is in their building phase. So you have to make the playoffs. You have to make a little noise in the playoffs. You're making the playoffs at 8-9 or 9-8 as the Pittsburgh Mason Rudolph 7 seed and getting wiped wild card weekend. That's not good enough for anybody. That's not good enough for Robert Saleh. That's not good enough for Joe Douglas. This team, if they stay healthy and they do a few more things, because the job's not finished yet, they have work to do on this roster. They should be able to win 10 or 11 games pending their health. They should be able to. Because on paper, they're just about there. I'd say they're about 80-ish% there. I need to see a backup running back. I need to see a starting safety. I need another body in the front seven. And probably most importantly, they need another real receiver because they're going to go 3 wide and Mike Williams may just be ready in time for week 1. And the depth isn't there behind Garrett and Mike Williams yet. So they need another real receiver. I am never going to complain about adding more offensive line depth. Maybe that does come in round 1. Maybe that comes from Bakhtiari. Maybe it comes from another guy floating around. You do have to work under the assumption that there's going to be some missed games up front, and you really need 3 starting receivers in today's NFL. I don't necessarily say the Jets have to go add, you're not going to have 3 1,000-yard receivers, but you need another starting receiver. Al Lazard, Xavier Gibson, Jason Brownlee, they're not ready to be starting receivers yet. So what other moves are you looking for to get that 80% to 100% where we can sit here confidently and say, this is an 11-6 team. This is an 11-6 team that should win the NFC East. What else needs to happen?
Yeah, well, so you're a Knicks fan, right? And so it's funny because my brother's also a Knicks fan, and I've shared this with you before. So he sent me a text the other day. He's like, "Is this the most talented Jets roster that I've seen since I've been a Jets fan?" And I said, on paper, you could make the case, right? Like just on talent, from quarterback to running back to receiver. But to your point about getting that last 20%, if they were to sign Tyler Boyd tomorrow, right? Like say they sign Tyler Boyd tomorrow. And they signed Justin Simmons, then I could definitively say, listen, I think all bets are off because if they're healthy, they're probably the most talented team in that division. And in the AFC, because of just the murderer's row of quarterbacks that it is, you're going to get Joe Burrow back. You have to assume that Trevor Lawrence is going to bounce back from a pretty bad year and be closer to the Trevor Lawrence that he was the year before, the first year under Doug Peterson. The Titans are probably going to be a tough out. They've had a really good offseason. You have the Browns, regardless of who plays quarterback for them, it's a really good team. The Ravens have lost 3 starters, but you'd hope that they, you trust that they have a plan. The point that you make about, and I mentioned the Knicks because the Knicks are so good right now that it's not them squeaking into the playoffs. The Jets need to do the same. The Jets need to be like an 11-win team. And if you added Tyler Boyd, Justin Simmons, and say Bud Dupree, say those are the next 3 signings, that automatically, one of the things that we've talked about a lot whenever we prepare for the draft and free agency, the Jets have had to do a good enough job of raising the floor of this team, not so much the ceiling. You have to raise the floor because you're going to have injuries and it can't fall off a cliff when somebody gets hurt. I think they've done that. Now they have a chance if they were to make those 3 signings. Again, Tyler Boyd, I love. Really good slot receiver, really productive, knows how to play with 2 other guys that demand the ball, right? He comes from that kind of offense. Good run blocker too, right? So, and you want receivers that are willing to get physical in the run game. If you added Tyler Boyd, if you added Justin Simmons, who again, still one of the better safeties in the league and would drastically improve the back end of this secondary, right? And you add Bud Dupree, who has thrived in situational pass rushing roles and stops the run. And that's another guy, I'll tell you, that you and I have been banging the drum.
I know. That's what I was just going to say. I feel like we've been talking about Bud Dupree since before we met our wives. Which is
yes. Exactly.
Mocking him to the Jets and in this offseason.
And anytime he hits free agency, yes, he's in every dream offseason. But if you added those 3 guys, I think now you're talking about a team that if Rodgers is healthy, and I agree with you about the backup running back role, but I do wonder if they lean in the draft for a backup running back, right? Do they go for Jalen Wright, right? Do they aim for Jonathan Brooks? If they trade back and get a 2nd-round pick, do you add depth behind Breece Hall that way, right? Because I think you can do that. I think running backs are so disposable, you can do that. Now you're talking about a team that probably poses the biggest threat to Kansas City. Like now you're talking about that team, right? The team that can go into Arrowhead. And again, you think that they have a chance to beat the Chiefs, or, if something wacky happens and the Chiefs end up the 4 seed again, that they can beat them in MetLife in January, to go to the Super Bowl. So you've raised the floor. Now you have a chance with those 3 guys, Boyd, Simmons, Dupree. You get those 3, and maybe Andrews Pete as like the backup swing tackle guy, who can play inside. You get those 4 guys. You're now raising the ceiling to a Super Bowl contending team, I think.
Yeah, and I like that. One, I like that we're talking Super Bowl again. That's why I brought you up. That brings that energy we need.
Yeah.
2, I like that we're focusing on some of the veteran solves here, because we're going to talk basically exclusively about the draft from now up through our draft party, which we just announced, by the way. Reds by MetLife. Get your ticket now. BadlandsTOJ.com. We're going to do a live podcast for the first time since the Leonard Williams draft, which we did back in the day. We'll find a way to live stream the reaction in some shape or form. Drink specials, food specials, raffles. Our whole gang will be there. We'll obviously have Connor in spirit and on the screen watching his pregame show. And we have a private room, which will be good. You got to keep all the Jet fan maniacs
away from the normal folks.
Contained. So that's at BadlandsTOJ.com. And the good news is if you bought a quarter zip, your ticket's like 40% off already. So get a quarter zip, come to the draft party. Everyone wins. We all get to hang. However, we can't talk about the draft to solve all of these holes that we're talking about. Some of them do have to come via the veteran route. And I mean, I feel like we've also been waiting forever for the Jets to get that true center fielder free safety.
Yeah.
They're going to get, Gardner Johnson we were talking about for a while. The guy who sort of played that like Kerry Rhodes role, who can roam around back there behind Sauce, behind Reed, behind Michael Carter, and intercept 5, 6, 7 passes in a season. Tony Adams looked more like a third safety than a starter last year. Chuck Clark's coming off a major injury. They need a guy who could chew up some major reps last year in a way that Adrian Amos couldn't.
Yes.
So is that Simmons? Is it Quandre Diggs? Like Simmons would be real nice, like a perfect fit. I can kind of live with anyone that they go with at backup running back. It feels like it'll be Zeke or J.K. Dobbins. Those are like the 2 that they'll pick from. Pete is like Pete or Bakhtiari are the kind of guys they've gotten a lot of starts. They come in as your 6th or 7th lineman. Like you feel good about that. If the Jets end up taking an offensive lineman in round 1, it depends who it is, like where they slot in. Like if they're getting one of the tackles, like Fuaga or Fashanu, like they're going to start as a backup, but probably end up starting a decent amount of games, filling in for either Smith or Moses, or they'll find their way to it. If it's if it's one of the interior players, does that guy beat out Simpson maybe and let Simpson be your top backup with Schweitzer?
Right.
I still think a pass catcher probably ends up being more likely, although I would not hate at this point. I would love to add Boyd still. I still like Boyd as like that tertiary option. I'm less crazy about Odell. He's still floating out there, but Odell behind Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson, not as bad as Odell being just behind Garrett Wilson. I could kind of live with that. I think it's almost like 50-50 if the Jets are going offensive line or pass catcher in round 1. I think it's going to depend how the board breaks. I do think there's real smoke and potential depending how things go of them trading up and doing something very aggressive for a guy like MHJ. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's off the board. And I think they want another weapon and a playmaker. And I think they probably feel good internally about their offensive line, even if they shouldn't, because I think in the building, they're probably higher on Warren, Schweitzer, and Mitchell than most fans are. And they're probably like, okay, like we need another playmaker though. They're not naive about Lazard and Gibson and what their roles are. So there's a lot of paths to still getting better. And they've given themselves a chance now with Morgan Moses, with Tyron Smith, with Mike Williams. They have work to do in that front 7. And we kind of, again, is it Bud Dupree who had 6.5 sacks last year? Is it Calais Campbell getting in the mix? Is it someone like that? Or can they strike gold on day 3 of the NFL draft? I don't think they're going to consider an edge rusher in round 1, all jokes aside. I think that would be an offensive player, definitely. But before we wrap here on this holiday weekend, give me one prediction on something that will happen in the next 60 days for the Jets. It can be draft, free agency, whatever. Give us the biggest news over the next 60 days for the Jets.
Okay. And so I am of the belief that as much as we talk about them trading back from 10, and I think they would love to do that, I actually do think that they're going to trade up to go get one of the wide receivers. I think that, to your point, I think they feel very comfortable with the O-line. I think they like Carter Warren a lot more than I would. But I also think that I think that's the benefit to a lot of these guys getting reps last year, right? Like that, again, you played them kind of all over the line. And I know while they've talked about keeping AVT in one spot, I think AVT's flexibility does give you the opportunity where, to your point, if say they do trade back and take Jackson Powers Johnson, do you take him, play him at center, move Tippmann to guard, and then move AVT to tackle if Tyron or Moses get hurt? Like that gives you options. That's a way to kind of do the offensive line thing without taking a tackle in the top 10 and you're picking up a second round pick. But I think they're going to trade up, but I don't think it's for Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it's for Malik Neighbors. I think that, right. Yeah. If you're telling me to put to shoot my shot at that, I think it's that. I think they go up and they go and get Malik Neighbors. Connor has said this repeatedly, and I think it's so true. I think they're 1A and 1B to me. I think Marvin Harrison's a little bit better, and I prefer Marvin Harrison because of his size, 6'4", 205. I like bigger receivers. But I think Malik Neighbors has a little bit of that Odell Beckham in him. Odell Beckham when he was coming out of LSU, that you just want to get the ball in his hands. He's a home run hitter. And if the Jets somehow, some way, left this draft with Malik Neighbors and Jalen Wright from Tennessee, you have now upped the home run potential on this offense. And that's something that they don't really have. Like, we haven't been able to see Garrett's big play ability, right? His ability to stretch the field, because he's been playing with, 3 blind mice at quarterback, right? So hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that with Rodgers. Mike Williams is a vertical threat. And again, you mentioned nine route Mike. Like, again, it's explosive. I think Malik Neighbors makes this offense that much more explosive because he's the guy that he can play outside. You move him around. He's fleet-footed. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands. I think if you get him the ball in space, there's probably like an 80% chance he's taking it to the house. And I think Joe Douglas, I think there is this misconception, given some of the comments that both him and Bob have made, that they don't understand how all in this year is. and I think that they do. I think that they get it. They've operated this offseason. I don't think they're worried so much about next year. They're like, listen, we need to win. We need to win this year. We need to win at least a playoff game this year. Because to quote Bob, they've all sucked. They've all sucked. And I think it's a trade-up for Malik Neighbors. I think that's the big move they made, because I think you're going to see 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4. I think McCarthy, May, Daniels, and Williams go 1 through 4. And then I think Joe Alt should probably start buying homes, looking for homes in Nashville, because I think he's going to go to the Titans. That 5 and 6 spot, I think Harbaugh looks to move back, and I think the Jets go up to try to get Malik Neighbors and pair him with Garrett Wilson long term.
Be electric,
yeah,
a potentially electric offense, and also the reaction of the trade up and the pick, similar to watching Rodgers throw that preseason touchdown last year. Everyone in the room together, is what we need, and it's why you need to come to the Badlands.
Yes.
Dalbin, great as always. I believe we're recording this Friday. I think we're going to drop it Easter morning to kick off your holiday the right way before you go out for your brunch and get some Bloody Marys and all that good stuff. Always a pleasure to talk. We'll look out for you on draft season. We'll look out for you across the Badlands feed as always. And everyone enjoy your holiday, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.